afternoon, good evening, the ones that I'm in the same time zone as we are here in Milan. A warm welcome to the fourth Global Legal Tech Hub roundtable on generative AI and law. And when I mean it's a warm welcome, because in Milan, more or less, it's like 35 degrees. So it's really warm. I was, because of the lineup, very special of our speakers today, I was even thinking about putting a tie, but with 35 degrees, sorry, I cannot do that. So you know me already, Alejandro Pérez. I'm your host. I've been your host, or trying to be the moderator for the past 3 legal roundtables. And today I'm particularly happy because the fourth roundtable focus on generative AI and access to justice is something that I might say I started to think about more or less in 1998 in my past, when I also used to work for the ministry in my home country in those years, Ministry of Labor. That's another era. A lot of things has happened since then, but the need for improving access to justice is still there. So let's recap. We started this journey about 3 weeks ago. The series started with a first presentation on putting a framework to generative AI and why actually it has an impact on all levels: governments, startups, publishers, obviously law firms and corporate departments. Then we focus on the technique on the second presentation, very technical, focus oriented about how to enrich these eventually the large language models. The third roundtable, just last week, we had 2 very generous speakers that show and they gave a demo on some proof of concepts or some projects still not necessarily public, focus on how to improve drafting and research especially for law firms. And we receive a lot of encouraging messages about that. Very generous what LawDroid and Lefebvre did. Today, we have a very similar spirit. We are going to have three speakers this time. And if I might introduce them and their subjects, so you have an idea about how we are going to organize today. So the first speaker is going to be Paul Handel, Paul, partner in Cija, Spain. It's going to provide us later. Each of the speakers is going to introduce themselves, but I might start by saying that Paul is going to introduce us to the framework where access to justice is going to be played, in the sense that, for instance, if you're in a startup and thinking about providing this kind of services using, obviously, these amazing new technologies that are available on artificial intelligence, what are the considerations to have in mind? Responsibility, data protection, etc. And also, because of his role, obviously, Paul can give us an inside overview about how big law firms are going to provide, I not necessarily will say better services, but more efficient services and obviously deliver in a digital way their services. Then we are going to continue with Natalie Byrom from UK. Natalie is a researcher and policy advisor, and is going to take us through some of the discussions around data governance, court records, and data-driven technology in litigation. And it was very fun when we had, actually yesterday, we completed we catch up between the speakers, and Natalie was the one that always was keeping us on the importance of the definitions of the language. And so I expect that today too. The importance of words, the importance of being clear, what are we talking about when we talk about access to justice? Finally, Tiago Martins from Govtech, specialist at the Secretary of State of Justice in Portugal. Even if Tiago will be speaking at a personal, expressing his personal opinions, Tiago has a privileged view on what's going on and how the government and how they are fostering innovation. The spirit is to foster innovation and open innovation, participating into an ecosystem, how government can take advantage of an ecosystem where startups, where universities do actually participate. And he will be also talking about some of the first artificial intelligence applications at justice administration level. What we can expect about timing, more or less each speaker will have around 10 minutes, and then please do ask questions during the speaker's time. We are going, the amazing team, Carol, and the team behind this series is going to be collecting the questions, and I'm going to try my best in choosing those questions and providing at the end a Q&A session between all the speakers. That's all for me. Paul, if you would like to start. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome everyone. And thanks for joining. I'm going to share my screen right now. There you go. Fantastic. So just a little bit, some seconds to talk about me. I'm currently partner and head of legal technology at Écija, which is a law firm here in Spain, and also co-director at the Universidad de Valencia Legaltech lab. I'm also teaching legal tech classes at IU University and University in Navarra, and of course, an advisor at the Global Legal Tech Hub. So before I start talking about opportunities for startups or for anyone that wants to do something different and take the full advantage of generative AI, including in the access to justice field, I think this is very important curve. I don't know if you have seen it before. This is the hype cycle from Gartner about legal technology. So here we can spend hours talking about this, but what this curve does, it maps all the legal technologies depending on the maturity it has, right? So in the our vertical axis, we have the hype, and the horizontal axis, we have the time that technology has spent in the market. So this can show you which type of tools are very mature, that are the one on the right, and which ones are just starting and they have a little bit of hype. You can see the hype curve goes exponentially at the beginning of the technology, and then the expectations become to decrease. So if you can see here, anyone that wants to actually innovate, if you want to create a startup and trying to disrupt the market or to do something very different, if you use technologies that are on the right, these are the ones that are very mature, you're going to find with, of course, a lot of clients, right? Because these technologies have been proven to add value to those that implement it. But also you will find a lot of very mature vendors, right? Vendors that have millions of euros or dollars in capital that are very well established, right? So if you want to innovate and try something new, you should look for technologies that are at the beginning of their hype cycle. Technologies that you're gonna have less of a market, because not everyone wants to innovate that fast, right? So we see that the vast majority of people or of clients want to start implementing technology once the innovators have already tried them out, right? So you start like, you see something new and you try to wait until someone else tries it and it works, and then you start implementing. So that's the vast majority. Of course, there are innovators that are those that they can't wait to implement something new, but of course there are less in the market. So as you can see, legal chatbots here is actually the first one on the left. According to Gartner's hype cycle of legal tech, it's at this moment, this is 2021, it was a very immature technology, if we can say it like that. And that means that maybe the technology is not ready to actually be implemented by the vast majority of the industry, because maybe it's not ready, because maybe we haven't found the right use case. Anyhow, legal chatbots were considered in 2021 as a very immature technology. So I think that after ChatGPT and all these large language models came into existence last year, I think that we're going to see a lot of things moving around here, right? We can expect a lot being done with legal chatbots now that the LLMs are here. So I definitely invite you to try out new things. And like I always said, once the technology is ready, the main point is to find the right use case for that, right? Because you can say that you can do a lot of things, but if you want to actually solve a problem that actually causes an impact, you have to research a lot on what problem you want to solve and how do you want to use that technology. So I invite you all to learn a little bit more about this legal tech hype cycle. There's a lot of information on the web, and it's a very great tool for all type of startups or people that want to implement technology for legal use. So fantastic. So specifically for access to justice, we find many use cases that ChatGPT and other large language model can be used for. We see here legal information and education, legal document generation, right? About this, there are already a lot of tools in place regarding legal document generation that does not use this sophisticated artificial intelligence. What they use are rule-based systems, but there have been a lot of research and experimenting around this. If this type of large language model could actually replace the traditional way of document generation, because now there is a lot of work to be done if you want to automate a document. So you need to find a lot of, you need first to create a template from the document, then write some type of code into the document. So this is very time consuming. So if you can get a large language model or ChatGPT to actually make this document generation faster, I think that would be actually a very good idea. There's another type of use case, guidance through legal processes, legal aid services, community farming moderator, training tools for law students, hotline services, multilingual legal aid. So actually, you can do a lot of things with ChatGPT and these new technologies in the access to justice arena. We already found a lot of use cases before these large language models came to existence with rule-based tools or with traditional AI. Now that we have ChatGPT, I think that the access to justice arena will actually have a great impact. However, like Alejandro was saying, there are a lot of legal issues that you should take into consideration. The first one being unauthorized practice of law. So legal chatbot can provide some type of general advice. However, in some countries, more than in others, there's a very stringent legislation about what is considered to being actually practicing law. So maybe if you have a startup and you want to provide answers to legal questions, in some cases that could be considered as practicing law in some jurisdiction. So you need to make sure that the service you want to provide does not fall into this type of consideration. Also, there's a lot of liability for incorrect information. This was already, I mean, this exists for traditional type of providing legal services. If I have a law firms composed of persons, not of lawyers, and I already have liability for incorrect information. However, when you use automated systems or artificial intelligence, you need to be extra careful, right? Especially ChatGPT poses or other type of large language model poses additional considerations from the traditional AI because it works different. For example, hallucination is something that we're finding that ChatGPT causes or has this effect that traditional AI did not. So it's actually, you need to be more aware of this type of issue when using generative AI for access to justice than traditional AI. So I invite you to understand what is hallucination and other type of issues that are very proper to generative AI models based on large language models. Also, confidentiality and privacy issues. AI systems require a lot of data to be trained, and also when being put into production, they can gather a lot of information. So there's a lot right now. You can see there's a lot of discussion around OpenAI's confidentiality and privacy policies and data transfers and all those sort of things. So you need to be aware of that also. And then there inequality of access. Also, this is more than a legal issue. Something that you need to be aware of every time a new technology arises. There are people that have that benefit from them, but other people can be actually cause harm, right? So you need to understand what type of people you want to provide the service for and how to make sure you have equal access to all of them. There's also bias in AI decisions, like we said. ChatGPT and other type of large language models are being trained in large amount of data, and a lot of this data is for the same reason they have trained with a lot of data. This is on unsupervised type of learning, so that means that normally people is not controlling what data is being inputted or on what data that the system is being trained on. So you can actually find a lot of bias in that. Imagine that when you use the traditional AI, that you use supervised learning, and that you actually decided which data to feed on your system, you still have bias. So in large language models that are trained on an unsupervised manner, this risk actually multiplies by 1,000, right? And also there's the part of accountability and transparency that it existed before in traditional AI. That means that you cannot explain why an AI system is giving you certain type of output because the algorithm is very complex to understand. So this happens also, and a lot more in large language models. Actually, large language models like ChatGPT are providing output that they weren't actually trained for, and this is a concern the AI research are having right now, that they're saying sometimes we don't understand how these models are having this capability. So I think that the black box effect of AI that already existed in traditional AI has multiplied by a lot in generative AI, and that is based in large language models. So I'm going to go faster right now because my time is almost done. So actually, we can find a lot of attitudes, different attitudes in for generative AI in law firms. I work at a large law firm, and we're actually doing a lot of experimentation with generative AI and trying to find the right use case. So what we can find, this is actually a report that was published by Thomson Reuters some months ago, and it shows that generative AI, normally all law firms consider that generative AI can be applied to legal work. However, they don't know it shouldn't, right? So we can find that there's a lot of maybe ethical concerns or maybe legal concerns about using it. So a very few actually law firms have planned ChatGPT or generative AI for use. This is a very few percentage. So I think that this is because we have found a lot of law firms right now that are publishing use cases for generative AI. However, it's a very minority of it. Also, We can find more information on, depending if the law firm is medium or large. We're going to share all this presentation with you guys, because there's a lot of information that we can talk for hours here. But at the end, I'm just going to go faster right now. At the end, there's no there's no signal for saying that the impact of generative AI in law firms is imminent. I think that it will take a little bit of more time for law firms to adopt generative AI. There's a lot of responsibility involved in there. And also there is a discussion around the business model of law firms, because actually you can see that many law firms charge by the hour. So they're saying, if we automate things and if we do things faster, how are we going to charge the same for the client? So actually law firms have to reinvent themselves. Also, we were discussing with Alejandro last time that normally disruption and change comes from the incumbent, not from the dominant market players. So there's a lot of opportunity for startups in this sector to actually make the correct use for this type of technology and maybe have some competitive advantages. And lastly, I'm really happy in the way AI and things come to are being right now happening, because before for a law firm or for a company to try to implement AI, they need to hire AI researchers, AI engineers, data scientists, and develop their own algorithm and code and gather a lot of data and then tag that data. So you could have to spend millions of dollars if you wanted to start testing on possible products for your company in AI. But now we have Microsoft, OpenAI, Amazon, IBM, and a lot of other companies that actually are democratizing the use of AI, because they're charging very small amount of money, and people can pay, for example, for ChatGPT $20 per month or so, and start experimenting things, or they can start to use the API, and they don't need to hire someone or to get data and train it. So I think that this is a very good news for society in general, because the use of AI and all of its power is not reserved to the few people that can afford it. So that's it for my part.
Thanks a lot, Paul. I realize we need more time for sure, and most probably I'm going to ask you later what are your client expectations or client feedback, if you could share. But now we go to Natalie, and Natalie, please.
Thank you so much. I too am going to attempt to share my screen. So give me 1 second. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that introduction. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all today. Now, today, I'm not going to start by talking about myself. I want to start by telling you about Awab Ishak. Now, Awab was 2 years and 8 days old when he died in 2020 from cardiac arrest, which was brought on by an acute respiratory condition. For much of his short life, he'd been in and out of his local doctor's surgery with repeated colds and chest infections. The coroner's report into his death stated that his doctor had felt that he visited the surgery more than other children his age. 6 months before Awab died, a health visitor attended the housing association flat where Awab lived with his parents. And this is what they found. The flat was covered in black mold. Awab's parents, refugees from Sudan, had first contacted their landlord in 2017 to ask for help to get rid of the mold. Instead, they were told to paint over it. By the time Awab was born in 2018, the mold was a persistent and a recurrent issue. In 2019, Awab's parents applied to be rehoused, and this application was rejected. In June 2020, Awab's desperate parents finally instructed a lawyer to make a claim for disrepair. An inspection confirmed the presence of mold, but still the landlord refused to act. By the time Awab was taken to hospital in December 2020, struggling to breathe, no action had been taken to treat the mold, which now invaded every single room in the flat. An inquest into Awab's death concluded that his death was caused by prolonged exposure to mold in his home environment. Now, Awab's death has been described in the UK as a defining moment for the social housing sector by the coroner, whose report urged government ministers to take action to prevent further deaths. Since news of Awab's death was reported, campaigners and the public have petitioned for changes to the law. But whilst there are undoubtedly improvements to the law that could be made, there are already laws that should have protected Awab. It was clear that the flat that he lived in met the definition of being unfit for human habitation when it was inspected on the 14th of July 2020. Rather than resulting from an absence of law, Awab's death is directly attributable to the fact that his family, despite their best efforts, were unable to compel their landlord to comply with the laws that already exist. What happened to Awab is a paradigmatic example of what we mean when we talk about the access to justice crisis. The preventable death of this lovely, funny little boy who loved to ride his bike is a stark illustration of the consequence of our collective failure to ensure that everyone is able to secure the rights and protections of the law. At a global level, the scale of the access to justice crisis is dizzying. A report by researchers published in 2019 estimated that globally 5.1 billion people, some 2/3 of the world's population, are unable to secure meaningful access to justice. ChatGPT has ignited interest in the role that generative AI might play in addressing this challenge. In the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to present a framework for thinking about access to justice and use this to help us explore the problems that generative AI might solve. I'll then outline the steps that will need to be taken by regulators and governments to ensure that the rush to generative AI addresses rather than exacerbates existing issues. So firstly, what do we mean when we talk about access to justice? I'm going to here use the definition of access to justice that's been adopted by the Court Service in England and Wales to evaluate the impact of their ongoing programme of court reform. So basically, under this definition, access to justice means that all individuals and a full run of cases are able to access the formal mechanisms of redress provided by the state, by which we mean courts, tribunals, ombudsman schemes, and court annexed mediation, access a fair and effective hearing, access a decision in accordance with law, and access the outcome of that decision on an equal basis. The components of this definition are mutually reinforcing and indivisible, which is just a fancy way of saying that if you increase the number of people who enter the legal system, but fail to ensure that they receive a fair and effective hearing, or secure an increase in the number of people who receive a decision in accordance with law, but don't ensure that they're able to access the outcome of that decision, you haven't increased access to justice. And this is really important when thinking about the impact or the potential of generative AI to alleviate the access to justice crisis. Now, in this slide, I've tried to set out some of the most common and pervasive access to justice challenges, clustering them under the 4 elements of the framework I just described. Now, this is where it's important to emphasize the mutually reinforcing part, because it's clear that while I've listed issues under particular components, some of them, such as legal capability, complexity, and access to advice, cut across multiple elements. Backlogs and pressure to hear cases faster obviously impact not just on the ability of individuals to enter the system, but can impact on the fairness and efficacy of their hearings once they've entered. And ineffective enforcement impacts quite rationally on people's decision-making around accessing the formal legal system in the first place. And in England and Wales and elsewhere, enforcement is a huge issue. Recent research demonstrated that 51%, over half of awards in our employment tribunals, go unpaid, and this disproportionately impacts on the most vulnerable and marginalised claimants. It's also important for us to reflect here on Awab's case. His parents, despite having English as a second language, had recognised that what they were experiencing was a problem that admitted of a legal solution, and they had accessed legal advice. They had even managed to secure a decision following the inspection in their favour with regard to the damp. The issue was the landlord failed to act to rectify the problem. And despite all of the publicity and coverage I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, when journalists returned to visit the estate where Awab's family lived, they found this. The reporters were unable to speak to the current tenant. He has a child the same age as Awab. Now, I raise this here because reflecting on the interconnected nature of the challenges around access to justice is vital when we're thinking about the prospects for generative AI to make a meaningful difference. At present, there are 3 claims that have been made about generative AI and its potential to address the access to justice crisis. These can broadly be summarised as follows. Firstly, that generative AI will increase access to legal advice, either indirectly by reducing the cost of legal services because providers will pass on the lower costs of legal research to their clients, or by substituting for in-person legal advice entirely. Although I would add that I believe that that's a much more medium to long-term prospect. Secondly, that generative AI can help to reduce complexity by helping people to draft legal documents, something it already seems pretty good at, or point people to generic information about how to file a claim. And the third claim that's made about generative AI and access to justice is that it will democratize access to the benefits of legal representation by helping people to identify which cases to cite in arguments when they're appearing before courts. And research has demonstrated that this is a key advantage conferred by representation, citing effective authorities for legal arguments. But in order to achieve these gains, there are a number of structural challenges that must be overcome. Firstly, regulation is needed to help us to ensure that the outputs of models are accurate. Developing proportionate regulation that's not a knee-jerk reaction will mean looking at the impact of these technologies on the system as a whole. So if generative AI lowers the barrier to entering the legal system, leads to an influx of new cases, that isn't actually going to help with backlogs or solve the problem of enforcement. Similarly, if it encourages more people to represent themselves, that might actually slow down hearings. So we need to look at the impact of these technologies on the system as the whole. And this will require us to have better data about the system, which is one area where I think the hype around generative AI really can help. Better data is badly needed because, put simply, and in general, the parts of the justice system that are most impacted by access to justice challenges are those that we know least about. In my role as the advisor to court service in England and Wales, I was shocked by how many basic questions we were simply unable to answer because the data either A, hadn't been collected, or B, was collected in an unstructured format and therefore not usable. So these were things like how many judges sat in the courts during COVID, how long do hearings take, what happens to people from different backgrounds when they try to access the justice system. We simply don't know. And if you add to this the fact that many judgments and decisions in the lower courts, particularly in relation to those areas of law that most affect people, they're simply not recorded. So that's areas like housing and family. Of course, there are exceptions to the general rule that we lack data about what happens in the courts. And what I perhaps should have said is that the state lacks access to data. High volume and repeat litigants like insurance companies and private publishers of information like LexisNexis, Justice and Thomson Reuters have their own repositories which dwarf the data that is available from public sources. Now, these companies regard this data as proprietary and therefore are disincentivized to share it. This means both that we're unable to evaluate claims that they make about the tools that they build, and further serves to create incentives that divert research and innovation away from the access to justice challenge and towards the interest of repeat players. It also places the most accurate tools out of the reach of the types of organisations that work on access to justice challenges. So the hallucinations, which we heard about in the previous presentation, can be reduced by retrieval augmented generation, but this is only available to those who already have access to large data sets, let alone private consumers. So far from addressing problems, the status quo risks exacerbating inequalities of arms. Getting governance right in the interest of promoting access to justice means breaking the stranglehold of private publishers on access to judgments and legal data, and moving from ad hoc arrangements for judgment publication that we have at present to something that looks more like a complete record. And this, at least in the short to medium term, may be where the true access to justice impact of generative AI comes from, that it forces us to examine and address existing issues with the information ecosystem that exists around the justice system. Because the absence of a complete record of judgments and decisions in the public domain doesn't just undermine innovation, it undermines accountability. Putting more judgments into the public domain can help us to understand patterns in the types of claimants and defendants coming before courts, and it may also help us to encourage enforcement. If the hype around generative AI prompts us to look at this again and to make stories like AWAB's more visible and shame bad actors into changing their behaviour, it will be a very good thing indeed for access to justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm speechless. Amazing presentation. When we were asking to provide a number to this to access to justice, I didn't realize how important it is to give a face to this. So Paul gave us a very action-oriented, business-oriented presentation. Natalie, a truly inspirational speech. Tiago, there are no pressures on you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And because of that, I would like to first thank you, Alejandro, Pérez, for the invitation to join this roundtable conversation and possibly the follow-up that will happen, in my opinion, certainly. And today, it's a great day. And when I'm now in Denmark, I'm based in Portugal, and during the flight, I was thinking, what should I say today? And because I was a bit sleepy, I was trying to do other stuff, and I was reading a magazine, and I found something that I would like to share with you, and maybe that will turn the tone for what I would like to say after. So if first you allow me to share the screen. So you are seeing it, correct? So we are here to talk about the application of artificial intelligence systems and tools. And actually, in this report, in this magazine, the founder of OpenAI, that is the company behind ChatGPT, was himself thinking of the possible social implications of the ethics that they are only now seeing after they deploy, they test, they try, and when it goes live, it's when the problems come in. So this is a new thing, I believe, in all business areas, even in the public sector, that sometimes you cannot foresee in advance everything that will happen, because we are dealing with kind of disruptive innovation versus the incremental innovation. So now, with one just click, when ChatGPT came about, all new business started to emerge and are disrupting the way how we do things. And we, in the public sector, from Portugal, were very attracted to this compelling idea of being part of this journey and don't be outside of it. I mean, so because Portugal has been recognized international as an early adopter on what it means, the digitalization of public services. Nevertheless, there are some points that should be addressed, specifically when it comes to the development phase of these solutions, and how can we foster a closer connection with the legal tech, or if we are talking about the legal practices, to bring everyone in the whole innovation life cycle, because you want to make useful solutions for the citizens, and these citizens are the citizens of today, not the citizens of the 29th century, sorry, my English. When these organizations, that in the case of justice in Portugal, there are 18 justice public bodies, that their foundations or rationale behind their organization is, you can track back to the 19th century, but they are using the 20th century technology and how they can use that to solve and to tackle the issues and the necessities, or to provide or to answer to the necessities of citizens and companies in 2023. So that's why here we here in Portugal, and before I move on, I would like to say again that I'm speaking on a personal capacity. I'm not talking on behalf of my entity, the Secretary of State for Justice, but I thought this would be a nice forum to explain what we have been doing in Portugal, and as a way to engage with this legal or external world, the legal tech community, and we see here a great opportunity, and myself, I'm very pleased to do so. And we came to a conclusion that if you want to promote this modernization or the digital transformation using modern day technologies, we would to see this as an opportunity to rethink all the business model of these public bodies. So it's not just about digitizing or digitalization or bringing to the online world what happens in the physical world. If the process or the services are inefficient, are not accessible, are not designed for our final beneficiary. So we think this as an opportunity to promote a rethinking, to rethink how we deliver our services, and having the people, the person, the individual at the center of this, because most of the times, as we are seeing, it's not just about technology itself, it's what people makes of it or how they use it. And we see this as an opportunity, again, to train our people, let's say, but also to educate or raise awareness for these appliances of emergent technologies such as artificial intelligence in the public sector context, that they have their own specifics. And for this, we believe this triangle of areas to work on are guiding how we are deploying our tech projects in different areas, but mainly on courts and on registry. And we came to a conclusion that if you want to make this process as engaging as possible, as faster as possible, and always thinking about the end user, we decided to create our own Justice Govtech strategy, or how to use this Govtech approach to inspire the development of technologies, bringing every stakeholder together and to define from the problem definition to taking ownership of it, to define possible pathways for solutions, and then for the development, the testing, or the experiment, the beta stages, the pilot phases. And in the end, we have solutions that are actually used by citizens, are actually used by our public servants, civil servants. And this was also done because in Portugal, that for the last a decade or 15 years, we are kind of creating our entrepreneurship ecosystem, that we are trying to see ourselves, sometimes yes, sometimes not so much, but as a startup nation, that we kind of create solutions, but somehow these solutions are the target were not the public sector in themselves. So we see that why not to invite these companies, not only in Portugal, but why not to inspire startups or innovators, research centers, even the university on the research part of it, to work with us and to create concrete solutions for the justice sector. And for this, we divided in 4 main pillars, or how to actually start to doing stuff to start doing concrete initiatives and do this on an iterative process. So we are trying to experiment with technologies. We are trying to experiment with methodologies on how to reach out to these innovators, to these business leaders, even legal companies that they want to work with us. So we define these 4 main pillars: skills, how to train our people, the capacity or the skills they must hold right now in order to perform their job better, namely the digital skills. Then how can we create a framework to fasten the execution of projects that the market already have an emerging technology available, and the problem is clearly defined, and we cannot see that the public sector can only do big projects or things that take too much time, or 2 years, 3 years, and then the opportunity goes because the startup or that has the solution closed its business, or the needs of the citizens of the company has changed. So we are trying to create or to establish this fast execution framework. As in doing that, with a 3rd pillar, that to reach out, to engage more with the academia world, that it's not that common. If you take out the policy making part of justice, because that happens already, but it's not that common to think about innovation in the justice sector and what has been done in a good way, what are the best practices abroad or internally that we can bring into our business and to engage to create the future of justice today with these knowledgeable and experts as Professor Natalie and other scholars around the world. And a way to trigger these connections that we are doing is through some standards that are already available in how to promote this engagement. And I would like to talk specifically the justice challenges that we have been launching. So our pillar, or our main way to do this, is to start creating a community, or think like a community, to bring these people together to start working with us. And we have different spaces in our public agencies, like the Justice Hub, that is our center for innovation in the justice area here in Portugal, where we invite all different stakeholders to come to us and to organize co-creation initiatives. And for example, I use this image on purpose because these chairs are not here randomly, or not just because they are beautiful. They are here because they are discomfortable. And the thought behind all the design of the center was to ensure the process of thinking that innovation is most of the times discomfortable for the ones that are doing it or thinking to it. And you have to take these lawyers, solicitors, judges from their day-to-day business to invite them to come with us and think outside the box, and that must to be replicated on the physical world. So these spaces are open for everyone that wants to engage with us. We invited them. Actually, we receive a lot of international delegations that they came here to see how we are doing and use this as the epicenter for it. And through this Justice Hub Center, we are organizing different kind of skills development initiatives, but I just would like to highlight one of them, during which we promoted to the leaders of these entities, the project managers, the people working on concrete projects, the skills development, namely on digital transformation of, for example, what it is AI and what that can mean to their own business on their own entity. This was very interesting, not only because of the concepts that they kind of learn and retain, but also as a networking to put them speaking together about these topics that sometimes these are not that common. If you look at the public administration culture or in culture, that people works a bit in silos or don't speak with each other. If they speak via email, but they don't actually know their faces. And this Justice Lab training program is also a way to promote that community feeling and understand that the projects, the strategies, the ideas can also come from a top-down approach, but mostly, and you would like to do that to create more sustainability on these kind of initiatives from bottom up. So it's not the political level leading the way sometimes, but sometimes it can be the technical, the public administration leading the way to challenging the politicians to try to test, to try to offer new kinds of initiatives. And that's what we have been doing actually. And I would like to highlight some ideas or some areas that we have been working. In Portugal, we have the competencies for the land cadastre. And that used to be a very manual process that every people that wants us to mark their territory, they will to go there in person physically. But the thing is, many lands in Portugal, they are not registered. So when you are, for example, in the inheritances processes to divide a given territory for different children, it's very hard to do that. So we create a platform called Boopy that helps with geospatial data and using machine learning algorithms to help these people. And I put this person, Senor Manuel, on purpose because this is an immigrant that lives abroad, that every summer he comes to Portugal and he wanted some kind of help to guide on this process. And using a telephone, a mobile phone, you can already interact with this solution, with this software that will help you to map the territory, and there are call to actions to register it in order to become official. And this is also very helpful in terms of land management. An example, this project started because there was a huge fire in Portugal in 2017 when more than 30 people died. And one of the reasons of that is because the land was not being cleaned, was not being well managed. So we didn't have the sense, the knowledge of our own territory. And since then, we have been testing with this technology to provide better services on the registry area, such as also another one on the criminal investigation. We are using virtual reality technologies to help the professionals in justice to perform better their job. Another one that for us it's strategic. It's the robot process automation area, because we want to not only turn the process more efficient on a manual way, but how to simply just take the manual part of it. So, for example, in Portugal, just a few months ago, if you wanted to create a company and you wanted a pre-registered name that was already approved, people have to go to this given list of companies. And if I ask you, how do you think these names came about? So how the names of these companies were put together? So for many years, it were 4 people, 4 professionals that their daily job was to sit down in front of a computer and write manually the names that they wanted to have. So this was very inefficient, right? So we engaged with a startup that developed an algorithm that is now automating the name creation of these pre-approved company names, but with the add-on that is that the name needs to reflect the principal economic activity that the entrepreneur, the business person, wants to work in. And this is for us a very interesting, because we are creating better services. At the same time, you are making the public administration more efficient, because these people can be reallocated to other areas or to more stimulating activities. Another area, and that is zooming into our area, the topic of today, is in the court section. For example, there is a huge demand, especially from the lawyers area is to have a higher number of court decisions publicized or public available online. But one thing that is holding that back is the anonymization of the personal data involved on these court decisions. And we are working with a research center here in Portugal to create a solution for every court, for every instances, to fast the process of anonymize the personal data that we believe will increase the knowledge or the jurisprudence, sorry if I'm not saying the right terminology, but it will help the judges to find previous decisions on the fields that they are researching to or I have to decide to, but will also help lawyers to possibly have more data, have more information for their own work. And you want to, it's another area, to integrate this public hold data or information to the legal tech or legal companies softwares to make this process as fast as possible and as little or as not manually but automatically. So this is quite important for us, and you are starting with the administrative and tax courts. And I would like to conclude, because I'm seeing Alejandro wanting me to shut up, just to share with you something that we have been trying to do it for 1 year, but it was because ChatGPT that these projects actually came about. So we wanted to make the access to justice more easier and more accessible in a way that if you want to have your problem solved, you have to find information from a public official website or place. So we created an intelligent guide, a chatbot that works as ChatGPT, but it's not using the ChatGPT system. It's only using the model behind ChatGPT, that is the GPT 3.5. Now it's the version that we are using that help us to provide more accurate information in the way that is organized, and there are call to actions if they want to have one of these 18 or services from these 18 organizations. And this is being a very iterative process. That's where we are learning, and we are on a pilot phase right now, and you are learning day by day. For example, if you want to create a new service on top of another one, it's not just about creating more information or feeding the algorithm or the model with more data, because there are a lot of intersections, because there are specific questions that we didn't foresee in advance. And if you want to try and to test and to offer a concrete solution for a need that is needed now and not in 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, we have somehow to create the project that is the MVP, the minimal viable product, to start testing with the end user, the ones that you want to serve. And just to finish, Alejandro, we are launching some initiatives that we invite all of you to get more information on, to challenge us in the way that share with us some problems, some opportunities, not only for a given challenge that here I'm presenting, the conceptual research, but with an open call for innovation, we can start collaborating and start to getting to know each other. This is first driven or targeting the Portuguese sector, but as in everything, we are eager to connect with everyone at the international level. So this is also an interesting area that we could further discuss afterwards. For the moment, I just would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm sorry if I extended too much, but this is the normal Tiago, speaks too much.
Well, that's the problem with passionate people everywhere. I shouldn't invite passionate speakers any longer.
Sorry.
I just need ChatGPT's speakers. So good, thank you. Thanks so much, Tiago. Actually, good news and some other good news. The first good news is that we are going to be invited by our Vice President, Mr. Albert Ferrer, that is behind the scenes in all these generative AI sessions, to go to all of us to Madrid to continue the conversation, because actually we need to do that. Second good news, the organization said, actually, we shouldn't be Swiss today like I normally am. We can go 5 minutes longer because obviously this table deserves 5 minutes longer. I will, unfortunately, I will ask. So even if we go 5 minutes longer, I will ask just one question, or just for a final consideration to each of the speakers. And thanks so much for all the questions we've seen on the chat. Most probably even the speakers will have access to those questions, and in their free time they can answer some of that. And we don't promise today, maybe tomorrow. Paul, maybe to start with you again, the pending question. So is there pressure on the better delivery of legal services at your level from the clients? Obviously, I'm talking.
Yes,
or what
I mean,
are the
of course,
expectations? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of course, I think that we always need to find better ways to serve our clients. And I think that generative AI or AI itself, you can automate a lot of things that normally were not able to do so before with rule-based models or traditional AI. So I think that, yes, there's a pressure on the side of law firms. And I think that the same pressure is being felt in all industries. Generative AI poses a threat, but more than a threat, an opportunity to actually gain a competitive advantage from other players in the industry. And I think that clients, especially in the legal field, are now asking more questions to law firms on how are we planning, or if we can be using generative AI for certain things. That didn't happen before, as in the same extent is happening now. So with traditional AI, we have some clients saying, well, can we automate this with AI? But from 10 clients you worked with, maybe one just asked for that. But now generative AI has actually raised the expectations from clients, and they are waiting for law firms to start implementing AI to make their work easier, right? So yes, definitely, I think there's pressure, but for of the good type of pressure.
Challenging pressure. Thanks a lot, Paul. Natalie, I'm sure you have so many comments on Tiago's presentation, but I wanted to also ask you about something that you started to develop, the importance of data-driven or to base our decisions based on data, and how to avoid bias. That is something that also one of the attendees was asking.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was so fascinating listening to the presentations. And I think what Tiago's presentation really illustrated is how much we can. So I focus very narrowly in what I said on generative AI, but what Tiago described was a whole landscape of data-driven technologies. And actually a lot of, unlike in the big professional firms, we're starting from such a low base that there's a huge amount that you can achieve in terms of access to justice with things like decision trees, and also with, I'm a big fan of the idea that we might use large language models to actually better get data from unstructured text, which would help give us more visibility about what happens to people within the justice system. Because I think my key point is that one of the biggest access to justice challenges facing legal systems globally is that we know so little about the people who rely on the justice system for protection, and also what barriers they face within it. And the key benefit of digitization, if it's developed appropriately, is that it relies on a byproduct of digitization is hopefully improving the data that we have about the way our system operates, which has a whole range of benefits. There was a question in the chat around transparency and accountability, and I think it's really important. You'll have seen in Ottawa the practice direction that's been issued that's encouraging people to declare whenever AI has been used in the preparation of submissions to the court. And I do think that whilst we're in the early days where regulators are really struggling to know what's proportionate when it comes to generative AI, thinking about how we help courts themselves to develop an understanding of when generative AI is being used in the preparation of submissions is really key to making sure that we get the regulation right. And from a technical level, I think there are things like model cards for model reporting that ideally, if you're developing a solution based on ChatGPT or a similar technology, you need to be publishing alongside that details about the data the model was trained on, the level of accuracy, any biases, to help people to understand the risks associated with the different model. The other area that I think is really interesting is the potential to watermark text that is actually generated through generative AI, which will help to give us a better understanding at a system level of when these technologies are being used and what for, because it's only if we're able to assess, to understand where they're being used and then assess their impact across the kind of justice ecosystem that we'll be able to develop a proportionate rather than a knee-jerk regulatory response. So those were kind of two ideas that I had around, transparency and accountability.
That's excellent. Thanks so much. Tiago, any final considerations? I remember when we were discussing this presentation, you were mentioning the measures also that you are putting in place to avoid data protection issues, and how important or how difficult it is to innovate when the rules are changing, or there aren't so many rules actually in place, and obviously you have a big responsibility on that.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's always good to think that policy making or regulation cannot follow the pace of innovation, of innovation progress. So sometimes policymakers are always late on trying to regulate a specific area that involves technology. And this is the case. As we are speaking, in most countries, there are set rules or the overall a regulatory framework to help us to define what can we do, what can't we do. And this is the case. So we, at the European level, the EU, the European Union, it is being discussed a general regulation of how to use artificial intelligence and the considerations that involve the use of these technologies. So I think you mentioned one, that is the use of data and what that means for data privacy and the misuse of these personal data, especially when we are speaking on my own interest as a public body. So we have a social contract to people, to citizens, to companies, to always make sure that their data is safe and use it on the right way that is legally possible. And an experience, and I think that's what you are trying to mention, Alejandro, is that if we want to test the model, there are some information that we need to hold to train the system. So there are some legal constraints only because it is omissive in the law. There isn't a law saying what are the terms, the grounds. And there are connected initiatives that here in Europe, the general data protection regulation that is becoming a global standard that kind of holds back this following the innovation pace if you are in our case on the public sector, because we have some obligations nevertheless to use this. And that's why in the solution that I share the link here in the chat, if you go online and you say that we don't use personal data, we just save the information, the questions, the prompts that they were asked for 10 days. And this is because we need to try to understand what went wrong on the question, if there were mistakes given. And also, as I said before, you start with services. In our case, the GPJ, the Online Practical Guide to Justice, starts with marriage and divorce. And we deliver that services or the opportunity to have information of that services. But now we want to have a third one. It will be on how to create a company. So it will give you information how to create a company, but you cannot see them separately, because there will be possible questions that brings all these different areas together. So as I was thinking on the other day, that if a couple is in the process of getting a divorce and they own the company, how does that what are the implications of it? And the mixture of these areas, it can confuse the system in itself. So, and we cannot see that in advance. So it's hard to regulate something that sometimes we cannot, as I was saying in the beginning, you can only understand if you deploy it, if you actually do it. And this is a case that we believe we have to try, we have to be careful, but do it as we always said at international fora, when there are some international declarations or the negotiation of these regulations or public binding initiatives, that we have to promote innovation, but in a way that doesn't jeopardize the fundamental rights, even if there is or there aren't specific guides for a given sector. And with this, I give you an example to end. So here in Portugal, there was a bit, the judges were afraid that the AI systems will decide for them on a specific case. And there was a kind of a public opinion environment that was preventing us to actually test and experiment this technology, because there was this sense. But if you go to see what we have been doing for the last 10 years, that we are always saying any AI project in the justice area will be done without the human surveillance or the human overview, that in the end, it's a person, it's the person with the competence to make that decision that will decide that the information that this AI system gave him is the one that he wants to accept or not, or go along what these systems are giving them, because they are the rule makers in the end. So judges is the one deciding, not the tool. And this is something that it's hard, as the PC, the personal computer, was some years ago, as it was the internet some years ago, as it is being nowadays the use of cloud in the public sector. AI is the same. You can only see it as a tool, as a mean, and not end in itself.
Super. Thanks so much, Tiago. So much to talk. We are running out of time now, definitely. I will not be able to do a recap today. I can only say thanks a lot to all our speakers. I could only also thank the audience for being here for today, and also in the previous conversations, and inviting everyone to continue this journey that we started three weeks ago. It's a journey. It's, as you saw, with having generous speakers, you realize things that we know. You realize also things that we have so many doubts and so much to learn. The best thing is learning together. Let's continue this conversation. And well, and thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.